Steve Ditko began his career in the 50s and enjoyed enormous popularity almost from the first because of his style, which seems to cram into one panel more than any human eye can contain. He went to work in the early 60s for Marvel Comics, and there he was put to work on a number of different strips, most importantly, Spider-Man. And the quality of his art and the peculiarity of his art, the individuality of his art, made it the most popular costumed hero in the field very, very quickly. But it was his work on a character called Dr. Strange, a magician, a mage, a man who was possessed of supernatural powers, that brought him into the greatest prominence. He's an interesting man, and the strips that he creates of his own, when he's not just illustrating other people's writing, are very interesting. He has a very highly defined sense of good and evil, right and wrong. There are no gray areas for him. There's a character called Mr. A that Steve Ditko created that would give Charles Bronson nightmares for vigilantism. To Steve Ditko, the artist is the work, and the work is the telling of the story. And to this end, he would like to make the following statement.
Mr. A is based on Ayn Rand's theory of justice, on Aristotle's law of identity, his definition of man, and his view of art. Aristotle said that art is philosophically more important than history. History tells how men did act. Art shows how men could and should act. Art creates a model. An ideal man is a measuring standard. Without a measuring standard, nothing can be identified or judged, but everything can be measured. Disease and sicknesses are measured by a healthy organ or body. All measurement requires an appropriate standard. With it, one can measure down to atoms, up to the stars, and the changes in the character of a man. Aristotle defined man as a rational animal. Rationality is a potential that has to be actualized by choice and the right thinking method of logic applied to reason. The standard of measurement for all is the rational logical ruler. It objectively measures the rational and irrational thinking. A hero measures a man at his best in the worst situations. A hero is a man admired for his qualities or achievements and regarded as an ideal or model. Aristotle formulated the law of identity. A is A. A thing is what it is. It has a specific nature and identity. The truth cannot contradict itself and also be a lie. Mr. A's black and white card symbolizes the law of identity. It identifies the two moral potentials possible, the good and the evil, and by one's chosen action, the best or the worst potential can be actualized. The card is also a symbol of justice. For Ayn Rand, justice is objectively identifying a thing for what it is and treating it accordingly. No one gets the unearned. The innocent is not penalized, the guilty is not rewarded. The card is a refusal to violate the root of justice, the law of identity, by a gray compromise, a refusal to sacrifice the good to the evil or to accept any part of the evil as a greater good. Society has its admirable people, its heroes. They are found in all professions. But hidden by the complexities of society, they are not as clearly defined, not as understood, and not as effective model as a story with two opposing forces of right and wrong in a dramatic presentation, revealing the character's choices and actions that identify them and lead to a just ending where the hero and the right view of life wins. Early comic book heroes were not about life as it is, but creations of how a man with a clear understanding of right and wrong and more courage chose to act, even if branded an outlaw. He dispensed a better justice than a prevailing legal moral one. He was a moral avenger. He was not like everyone else, not the average, the common, or the ordinary man. He was the exceptional one, the uncommon one, the one doing what others were unwilling to do, regardless of the opposition and consequences to himself. His success provided a better model. Through a hero, one could identify the foolish, the corrupt, and the guilty. A lead character can be better or worse than society's best model, and if a man with proven better qualities appears, then a new measuring standard for men and society is established. A hero is a model for everyone, but not everyone is willing to act at his best. A less demanding model, blending good and bad, is more comforting, easier to accept. For the self-flawed, an anti-hero provides a heroic label without the need to act better. A crooked cop, a flawed cop, is not a valid model of a good law enforcer. An anti-cop corrupts the legal good, an anti-hero corrupts the moral good. Both corrupt ideals. Both choose the flaw over the perfect. The perfect is identified and measured by what is possible to man, a perfect bowling score. A perfect response accepts the truth and rejects the lie. The perfect hero on principle says yes to a true identity and no to a contradictory one. Ruled by justice, he treats every identity as it deserves. He is the actualized potential for good in its purest form, a true moral measuring ruler. He is the most human and deserving of respect. Today's flawed superheroes are superior in physical strength, but common, average, ordinary in mental strength. Rich in superpowers, but bankrupt in reasoning powers. They are perfect in overcoming the flawed supervillains, saving the world, the universe, yet helpless to solve their common, ordinary, average personal problems. It is like creating a perfectly physical adult with the reasoning limits of a 6-year-old. The creators of flawed ideals believe that no real difference exists between a flawed hero and a flawed villain. Both have some good and some bad in them, so they blend into a grayness where no one is better than anyone else, and where the worst can justifiably claim that he is as good as gray as the best. If it is impossible to know what is true and to do what is right, then the flaw, the worst, will be the new standard of good. Man will be defined as a flawed, anti-rational animal, and all that corrupts and harms life will be the new virtues. Like deliberately flawed eyesight, where self-blindness is the ideal, anti-life behavior will be the new standard for living. The resentment against the perfect hero is a resentment against A is A, against the integration of truth and behavior, against the non-contradictory identity of a moral ideal, against reality and life's measuring ruler, a rational moral standard.
Neal Adams brought realism and believability to the superhero genre when he began working in comic books in the mid-60s. He changed the face of the art form by coupling photorealism with dynamic action. In the pages of a comic called Dead Man, he began experimenting with page layout and form. And he did some astonishing work with Denny O'Neil on Green Lantern and Green Arrow. Very high social conscience in that strip, all through the 60s during the days of upheaval in this country, reflecting what our nation was going through. And then he went to work on the X-Men and the Avengers. And then, most importantly, he rescued the Batman from the swamp of television camp to which the Batman had sunk. And he made him once again the Dark Knight detective, a creature of night in the city, a creature that criminals would fear, the Batman we know today. He's currently publishing his own line of comic books for Continuity Graphics.
Dead Man was an opportunity to experiment with page format and layout. And I got a little radical on it. I have to admit, it was probably totally rambunctious and out of order for me to do, but I think probably the opportunity to stretch the medium a little bit, to create compositions that were in a medium that was truly its own medium. It wasn't like film where you could only see one picture at a time. It wasn't like comic strips, which I had done for a period of time and I was limited to a certain format. Here was a big rectangular page, and I could do anywhere between one drawing and 10 drawings on that page, and I could compose the page any way I wanted to. And I had certain attitudes about composing pages, which I had developed doing a syndicated strip, and I felt that I could lead the eye, that I could catch the reader and I could make him read the way I wanted him to read, that I could make him stop when I wanted him to stop by composing the pictures a certain way, that I could actually become one with the reader. If he was willing to go with me, if he was willing to read what I was doing, then I could, if I could just grab him by the throat, then he would follow and read in the way I wanted him to read. Dead Man was perhaps the most successful experiment in that area. You can read a Dead Man comic book and you almost unconsciously know when I want you to slow down or when I want you to speed up. You almost unconsciously know when I want you to slide through panels or when I want you to jump through panels. Just as a director will handle a different type of story a different way, our job as the artist and writer at times is to tell the story the way it suits the story. After all, as Shakespeare would say, the play is the thing. It's not the artist, it's not the director, it's not the producer, it's the story. If you're not faithful to the story, if the play isn't the thing, then why are you doing it in the first place? Well, in comic books, as with film, as with everything else, we're all servants of the story. We can warp the story, we can make it incorrect, or we can do it in a way that we believe is correct. If people agree with us, they'll like it. If they don't agree with us, they'll hate us. And in my case, I've been very lucky. People have liked the things that I've done. Batman was originally created by Bob Kane and Bill Finger and Jerry Robinson as this creature of the night who would scare the bejesus out of anybody he ran across, and criminals in particular. Whether or not he was right or whether this would work, that's what he did. That was what Batman was all about. And that's what I tried to return him to. So I think that one could say that Frank Miller, working on Batman now, has done more to make a more solid character out of Batman. At that time, at the time I entered my little editorialism into it, what I did was I brought him back to what he was supposed to be. Now people are playing with it within that framework, and I think doing a very good job. A comic book is as good as a writer who's sincerely talented and tries hard, and an artist who is very talented and tries very hard can make it. That's how good it can be. So if you put a good artist and a good writer together, and they try really hard to do something good, it just got to be a good comic book. And it can't be trash. It can only be viewed as trash by people who think of it that way. The things that are presented in comic books are good. The ideals are real and good. And kids like them. They're, as far as I know, the only medium outside of perhaps movies, the only reading medium that a kid will take money out of his own pocket and buy. Because he wants to read it. He'll even go to the dictionary to look up a word so he knows what this guy says. There's something important there. And Europeans think Americans are missing the boat. Maybe we are.